Lowe's helps refresh your garden in time for Mother's Day. Right now, get 5 bags of 1.5 cubic foot Scott's Naturescapes mulch for just $10. Plus, select 1.5 gallon annuals hanging baskets make the perfect gift. Now 2 for only $15. The best garden starts with great deals. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/7. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Discount taken at time of purchase.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need, have coverage options to protect the things you value most, file a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast and our match report following Forest's 1-1 draw away at Selhurst Park with Crystal Palace. 2 goals in the space of about 5 minutes decided the game. Forest went behind to an Eberechi Eze penalty, but managed to equalise with Murillo about 3 or 4 minutes later. Nice finish, and the scores remained 1-1. I'm your host, George Edwards, fresh from Selhurst Park, and a much warmer Stephen was watching at home. Are you okay, Stephen? How are you?
Yeah, it's all good, thank you. Yeah, very pleased to have come away with a point after the way that game played out at Selhurst Park.
Yeah, I think by the end, Forest was certainly quite lucky to get away with a point, to be honest, especially with the second half chances Palace had rather after Forest equalised. And Forest just didn't see in themselves, to me. I don't think they have really the last few weeks, but Murillo scored and I was expecting that to kick us into life, to go after it and win the game. But after that, there was almost a sort of flatness that descended upon Forest, and they were happy to take the point. So it was quite a weird game, which was quite uncharacteristic from Forest. But yeah, I think by the end, certainly happy with a point. So we'll get into the team news then. And the big omission was Callum Hudson-Odoi, who looked very injured when he was playing in the first half against Brentford. So it wasn't a surprise after he went off to see him not in the lineup. So it was Dominguez and Sangaré came in, and Yates also dropped out, as well as Callum Hudson-Odoi. So we had Matt Sells in goal, a back four of Ola Aina, Nikola Milenkovic, Murillo and Neco Williams. Anderson in midfield with Sangaré and then Gibbs White ahead of him. Nico Dominguez on the wing with Anthony Elanga on the other, and Chris Wood up front. Now, I think the Sangaré start was coming. He's impressed off the bench in the last few weeks, and I think it was always given that he was going to start maybe in these last few games. And obviously, with Hudson-Odoi out injured and Sousa and Jota not really trusted to go from the start, Dominguez out there didn't surprise me as well. So any complaints with the team news, Stephen?
I was quite pleased to see Sangaré given a start. We haven't seen much of him, particularly this season, for injury reasons, and also the fact that players have been in such good form, the likes of Dominguez, Anderson and Yates, that Sangaré's not really had a look in. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that Nuno started him at Selhurst Park. And my only criticism of the team news was that I think we should have given Jota Silva or Ramon Sousa a start in the absence of Callum Hudson-Odoi. I was a little bit worried that going with Dominguez in a game when we really wanted to try and get a win, if possible, would have meant that we weren't playing with our strongest formation. At least with Sousa or Jota Silva, you've got some width there and pace to trouble fullbacks, and as good and as solid as Nicolas Dominguez is, that's not really his game. But I could understand why Nuno went with that team, because it was a solid lineup and personnel that he trusts.
Yeah, I'd agree to an extent. I think I've made it quite clear that Jota from the start, I don't think can ever work unless he's a striker. As a winger, he doesn't give you a foot on in the game, and he really does frustrate me. So I think Sousa could have been one to start. He obviously started at Everton and did okay, but he does go a bit anonymous at times, and maybe Nuno wanted a bit of substance. But particularly with Aina still not really looking match fit and not bombing forward like he used to, certainly having that option would have been maybe preferable. In terms of the start of the game, firstly, so I was on the front row for a Palace away. Obviously, I'm lucky enough to be in the 400 club. So when I bought these tickets, I made sure I opted for the front row because the last 2 years, I've not seen a single thing. Now, the first year with the party experience we had at Palace, that wasn't really an issue. But last year, it was quite a struggle. So I made sure that I plumped for the front row seat so I could definitely see. And just before the game, so I had a good view. Just before the game, Callum Hudson-Odoi waltzes up to the gate about 5 or 10 yards to my right and walks through the away end. So a brilliant moment there. And what other Premier League club would allow one of their star players, and what star player would be willing to go into the away end and sit with the crowd and happily take photos? And one of my friends took a photo with him and it went viral on social media. So a lovely moment there. And it really does show the sort of relatability and connection between the club and the players at the minute and the fans, because some of them would just sit at home and watch it, whereas Cal wanted to be there. So I really enjoyed that. But in terms of the start of the game, I think Forest did struggle. Palace did really start better. I think they, particularly in wide areas, overwhelmed Forest first 20 minutes down that right side with Munoz and Sarr. It wasn't so much an issue down the left because Forest had Dominguez and Aina, two of their best defensive players, and Eze, their sort of left winger, drifts inside, so it was only Mitchell. Whereas on Palace's right, they've got Munoz, they've got Sarr, both like to pull wide, and we only really had Neco defending. Elanga didn't really support very well, and Anderson didn't know where to be. So I thought that was a bit of a struggle, to be honest. And then going forward, Forest really doubled up on Anthony Elanga. And apart from that, Forest had no threat out wide. So I thought Palace dominated the wide areas throughout the match, really. They got a couple of corners, didn't they? And didn't really make them count. But in terms of the first 20 minutes, Stephen, very Palace heavy. Do you think Forest coped with that very well?
I think they coped as well as they could have done in the circumstances. We know how good Forest have been this season in soaking up pressure and waiting for opportunities to pick the opposition off. And given that we have been shakier in form and defensively in recent weeks, I think we held out okay in those first 20 minutes and actually got stronger as the half went on. I think our passing was more accurate and more composed than it was against Brentford. There was still moments where I think we were trying too hard and we were trying to force the issue a bit too much. And I think that still comes down to a combination of tiredness, combination of pressure in the players' heads with the expectation. But overall, I think, given as well that Palace's last game before this one was their FA Cup semi-final against Aston Villa, they've had the best part of 9-10 days rest, and we've played Man City and Brentford in that time. Given all of those factors, I think we held out well in that first half and did our jobs and did what we needed to do.
Yeah, certainly I would agree. And I think after they rode the storm of corners and of pressure from Palace, I think Forest did really grow into the game. Once they could get their midfielders into the game and get Anderson and Sangaré on the ball, I thought they did really well. In terms of Sangaré's performance, I was actually quite impressed by him. I think defensively he still lacks a bit of positioning sense, and sometimes he looks like a rabbit in the headlights defensively. But on the ball, I thought he was actually quite good. He was always looking to play forward. There wasn't a lot of space because Palace made the pitch so small and so compact. They force you out wide and then trap you there. So I thought Sangaré tried to play forward, but never really gave the ball away a lot. And there was a time, I think it was about 20 minutes in, Murillo has it in the corner right in front of me, passes to Sangaré infield, and he's got 3 Palace players around him. And I was, I did a big grimace there, but he managed to touch well and give it back to Murillo and show composure there. So I thought Sangaré did quite well. And Elliot Anderson, what a phenomenal player, honestly. The recoveries, the positioning, the duels, everything about a sort of holding midfielder performance, he does perfectly. And I think as a number 8, connecting the midfield to the attack, he's such an important player. And obviously with Dominguez in there, it could have been Anderson out wide and Dominguez in midfield, and I wouldn't have minded that. But I think Anderson just proved why, if possible, he has got to be in that midfield next to your Yates, your Dominguez, your Sangaré, whoever is in that role. And I also thought Murillo had one of his strongest halves. Obviously scores in the second half and deserved it, but he was on the ball, he was confident. It was really that link between the midfield into midfield, which Forest may have been lacking finding over the last few weeks, and particularly in the second half. And we'll come to his injury. Once he went off, Forest just had to go long because they couldn't find the ball into midfield. So Murillo, for me, really did start to purr. So how did you make, particularly Sangaré, obviously he's coming into the spotlight, his first start since August, I think, in the Premier League. How did you think Sangaré in particular fared in that midfield?
I thought he was quite good. What I like about him is that he gives us some control in the midfield. he's not the quickest, so his recovery speed isn't always there in terms of getting up and down like you see a lot of Premier League midfielders do. But what he does give you is good composure on the ball and that element of control. And I don't think that, perhaps with the exception of Elliot Anderson, who I think can do a bit of everything, by the way, like you say, he's been brilliant. I don't think there's another midfielder in the Forest ranks who can give Forest that element of control in the midfield. And it's quite telling that after Sangaré went off last night, we struggled to maintain a foothold in the game. And Palace grew into it, and Palace got stronger as the game went on. And that also happened when Sangaré started against Exeter in the FA Cup, and after he came off then. Similar story, that Exeter seemed to get stronger and seemed to have more influence in the game. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen, now with the benefit of hindsight, Sangaré, how he would have fared in games against Everton, and perhaps even more so Brentford, when we perhaps needed that greater control in the midfield. He might have been able to give it us on those occasions.
And it's so good to have so many sort of players that are first team quality, but also that offer something so different. So you can have that variation. Dominguez offers you that ball winning ability, that tenacity, getting rid of it quickly. You know, Yates offers you the grit and determination and spirit that you need. And then Sangaré offers you the control. So you can vary it throughout matches and things like that. And it doesn't really weaken Forest, I wouldn't say. Obviously, some of them have a bad day from time to time. Dominguez has a stinker in him, really, and Yates can sometimes not give you control. But between the three of them, they really give you different options. And I think that, particularly if we're going into a European campaign next year, having to rotate between Premier League and stuff, that's a really strong thing to have. We've not got, 4 players that offer the same quality and maybe a different ability level. But in terms of chances, it was a pretty dull half, if you like. Palace's biggest and really only chance came from fullback to fullback. It was Mitchell down the left, one of their only chances down the left, really, ball into the far post. It was Munoz got there first, wasn't it, at the far post and tapped it towards goal. Sells made the save. But the chance of the half undoubtedly was a couple of minutes before half time, wasn't it? It's Forest with their first real breakaway, the first sort of Forest chance you'd associate them with creating. Win it on the edge of the box. Gibbs White sort of controls it, does well to keep hold of the ball, and then does well to turn and find Dominguez. It's after a corner that Forest clear. Dominguez then strides forward. It's a 3-on-3. Wood making space to the right, Elanga to the left. Dominguez takes a couple of touches over halfway, and then it's wide to Chris Wood. Does brilliantly, ball in front of Wood, and then Wood times his pass inside to Elanga into the box. Takes a touch, the Palace defender sort of sliding in, forcing him wide, but I still think Elanga has a good shot at it on his left foot, and I've discussed in previous episodes that he's willing to go on his left foot and he's trained that very well, so I don't really see it as a weaker foot, if you like. And then Elanga, it's a pretty poor shot, to be honest. It's straight at Henderson. I, at the time, was screaming that he should have stuck it away. I think if you look at it back, Henderson, you sometimes think of Alisson as a Liverpool goalkeeper. He looks so big in goal. I looked at that and thought Henderson looked tiny. And I didn't really know how he managed to hit him, to be honest. He just got to get his head down and blast it into the corner. And it's easy for me to say sat there in the away end, but I really thought he could have scored. And maybe, obviously, he missed that big chance going with his wrong foot, I think, in the semi-final. Do you think with the confidence maybe of a few weeks ago, Elanga sticks that away?
Yeah, I think so. You're seeing this lack of confidence throughout the team, and somebody like Elanga, I think I wouldn't say he's a confidence player because he has been really good all season, but it's probably in those moments when we need a finish from him. When he's confident and when he knows what he's doing, you've seen some really brilliant finishes on his left foot. The one away at Brentford, one away at Ipswich, and then the one in the FA Cup semi-final, which he missed. That's probably what happens when you're coming back from injury and your form's not quite what it was. I think the one last night was a little bit unfortunate because if you watch the replay, it looks like a Crystal Palace defender gets a slight nick on it, and that takes the ball towards Henderson where he can make the save. I think it would have been heading a bit more towards the bottom corner were it not for that intervention. So who knows? He might have been able to sneak it in under different circumstances.
Yeah, and if you think back to him, he's had a very long stint of goal involvement, of confidence. But you think back to him and Hudson-Odoi around October, November, Forest did really find a way to get them both purring. And you think of Man City, they only started with one of them, then another started at United. They were both out of confidence, both not in form. And then he had the Villa game where he came off the bench, got a goal, got an assist, and the goal ruled out as well. And that signified the change for him. So I wonder whether the miss at Wembley and Forest's recent poor form maybe has pulled him back. But I'm sure something will happen and his confidence will come back. So it's 1-1 at half time. I think possibly the correct score. I felt maybe that Palace had the better of it, but in terms of goal action, as we mentioned, where both teams had one chance and saw the goalkeeper save it quite comfortably. So if we look into the second half, thought Palace again started the half stronger, but there was two big chances to kick the half off, wasn't there? Pretty much straight away, maybe 2 or 3 minutes into it, and that both teams really got let off. So Forest conceded it first. It was Eze to Mateta to Sarr, and then at the far post, his shot comes in and it's saved by Sells very well, nicely down low. And then Forest get the ball, they drive forward, and it comes to Chris Wood with the ball over the top. He's forced wide by Palace as he controls it. It's a very good control from him in the box. But he's always sort of being crowded out, I think, and the angle's tightening by every touch that he takes, and he has a long time to think about it. And he's forced wide. The shot in the end towards the bottom left corner is deflected wide for a corner. So both teams let off Stephen early in the second half. Which chance do you think was the bigger one?
I think Chris Woods was the bigger one, but credit to the Palace defender. I think it's Lacroix. He makes a really good block there to divert Woods' effort wide, because there were players coming in around Sarr for Palace's effort, and it was a little bit trickier for him. Sells had come out and narrowed the angle and made a good save in the end, whereas I think the one from Chris Wood, on another day you could argue maybe he just gets it slightly further across through the defender's legs and into the bottom corner, but I think really there wasn't much more that Chris Wood could have done in that situation. It was just good defending by Crystal Palace, and maybe a little bit unlucky that it rolled the wrong side of the post, but that happens sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. But from then you wonder, chances like that often spur a team on, and it was Palace that spurred them on. And then 56 minutes in, so 11 minutes into the second half, they have the penalty incident. Now it's a ball in from the right. It's Mitchell who gets there first and looks like he's tripped by Sells or stood on by Sells. And I did initially grimace and thought, oh, that doesn't look good. And by the appeals, it wasn't just the whole stadium. It was a lot of the Palace players that went up for it as well. Then the ball goes out of play and VAR has a long look at it. But obviously in the stadium and from the Palace away, and you can't really see the TV, I wasn't that aware. So do you want to explain, Stephen, what came after that and how it resulted to the penalty?
So the ball was put in by Sarr. Mitchell's coming in at the back post and he's got Nicolas Dominguez with him, and Sells also comes out to try and block the ball. And in this collision, Mitchell ends up going down. The referee doesn't give it initially, and it's only when VAR asked him to come to the screen that we then see the replays ourselves. And yeah, when the ball comes in, as the ball is dropping, Mitchell does tread on it, and I think that sends him off balance. But when you then look at what comes next, Sells collides with him. Dominguez doesn't really do a lot in terms of contact. It is all Sells on Mitchell. Mitchell goes down, the penalty's given. I think in the end it was the right call, and it's frustrating for us because it felt quite preventable. It's just a simple ball lofted into the box. Granted, Mitchell's made that run unchallenged, but yeah, a disappointing one to concede. And I think even with the penalty, when Eze steps up to take it, I mean, I don't know how these stuttered run-ups are allowed. I'm sure at one point he takes a step backwards as well in the middle of it. And he's allowed to take all the time in the world to eventually stride up, hit the penalty. And because he's taken so long over it, Sells has had to commit. And in doing so, he's almost started to fall down because his body weight has shifted to where he needs to go. And he can't quite get to the penalty. It just goes above his hand and it's in the net. So a frustrating set of circumstances all around for Forest.
Yeah, I can't lie. I was absolutely incensed by the penalty taken from Eze. I mean, firstly, conceding a penalty from the crosses, it had likelihood to happen because of the amount of crosses that kept coming in from both sides from Palace, and they started putting it in from the left in the second half. So it wasn't a surprise that something came of that. But honestly, that is just ridiculous what he's doing from that penalty. And what I find the most laughable thing is, right, if Sells saved it but was off his line slightly, it has to be retaken. Even though Eze is the one stopping, starting, doing ridiculous things, and goalkeepers have now been told that I don't think they're allowed to bash the bar or some things like that.
Yeah.
penalty takers can just do that. It is absolutely outrageous. And surely there's an advantage having a penalty, let alone being able to do antics like that. And I just think it is baffling and they need to sort it out. But anyway, at least the concession of the goal kicked Forest into life, got them forward. They earned a free kick a couple of minutes later that Elanga swung in nicely, tried to catch Henderson off guard, and he tipped it over for the corner kick. And then that comes in, it's cleared out, comes to Neco Williams on the edge of the box. And he had a couple of these throughout the 90 minutes. And like I mentioned, Forest were very reluctant to do things quick. You know, it was almost like they were looking for that extra pass, the extra touch. But Neco got it out of his feet, shot towards goal. And it's not the best shot, if we're being honest. I thought it was a lucky deflection on its way in, and Neco maybe was robbed of a goal. But if you look at the replay, it was going wide, and Murillo does so well to arc his body, turn, tap it into the far post. I think it's an excellent, almost striker, instinctful finish from him, and that was a really brilliant moment for him. You know, obviously he's had his girlfriend announcing the pregnancy recently, and he got that moment to celebrate in front of the Forest fans, and you could see how much he just loved that moment. I love Murillo scoring, and I was slightly annoyed by the antics of the celebration because I wanted Forest to grab the ball, get it up the other end and charge for the winner. But Murillo loves his moments, doesn't he? And he certainly took that one.
Yeah, and I'm delighted to see him finally get on the score sheet for Forest. It was at that same end in the game last season where he'd gone on that mazy run, broke into the box, and in the end hit the toe poke shot, which was palmed away by the keeper, and he almost scored an absolute worldie. So I was glad that he was able to get a goal in the I was glad he was able to get a goal at that end of the pitch. And of course he has scored for Forest before. I think it was a header against Newcastle, wasn't it? So this wasn't his first Forest goal, but nevertheless, I was glad to see him on the score sheet, and it was such a good instinctive finish. I think Don Goodman on commentary said it was lucky or something, but I thought it was a clever bit of play from him to divert the ball back. And yes, it might not have looked the most pleasing goal on the eye when it first went in, but when you see what Murillo does on the replay, you really appreciate the skill involved. And it was a massive goal, and it was good to see Forest respond so quickly, because after what had happened in the previous couple of weeks, some of the results we've had and our drop off in form, we could have easily caved in once Palace took the lead in the way that they did. But credit to the players and credit to everybody involved. We fought back and very quickly got ourselves level.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. And I said that to Grab next to me. It's very important and good that Forest came out and scored that soon after, because if they'd have had a few chances and not scored, the heads might have dropped and there might have been that inevitable feeling, but they came out and scored again. Now, then the game got quite ugly, which I actually quite enjoyed. You know, you think of the last two teams that have came to the City Ground in Everton and Brentford. They just made the game dogged, tough, stop-start, and Forest went to Palace and did the exact same thing. Now, there's 9 yellow cards by the end. So we had Dominguez booked in the first half, which I actually thought was Sangaré. And a lot of the fans thought it was Sangaré because when he fouled later on in the half, Palace fans were chanting for him to get sent off. But it was Dominguez who got booked in the first half. Sells for the penalty. Then Sangaré, Williams, Gibbs-White, Aina and Yates by the end, with Morata getting booked in the 113th minute, with Kamada, Munoz and Nketiah getting booked for Crystal Palace by the end. Now, I didn't mind it, as I mentioned, Forest trying to make that game ugly and trying to, stop Palace getting into the flow of it. But I did think the referee was a bit card heavy, particularly the Aina and Yates one. I was baffled by either of them were a yellow card. What's Yates done to get booked there? And then he gives a free kick later on with Milenkovic in the corner, which he's just stronger than the guy, jumps, wins the header, and he blows up for it. And I think I've seen on Twitter Chris Wood's face of bemusement with one of the fouls that was given against him just because he was a foot taller than Jefferson Lerma. So it took a quite baffling direction, wasn't it, Stephen? What was your viewpoint on the whole Andy Madley situation at home?
I think I said in our WhatsApp group after the game that I thought the referee was getting paid on commission for Forest yellow cards, because that was the only explanation for the number that we got. There were so many double standards going on with the fouls and the bookings. Crystal Palace players were committing the same fouls, if not worse, in many cases, and they weren't getting pulled up on it. Forest player does it, and they're booked. So, what was it in the end? 7 or 8 bookings for Forest. That would assume that we were playing a really dirty and cynical game, but it wasn't the case. We were given as good as we were getting from Palace. Yeah. It's just that the referee wanted to seemingly punish Forest more for it. I couldn't understand it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Stephen. So if we look at towards the end of the game, then the Palace chances really started to come. And as I mentioned, Forest never really seemed to fight for the win. At one point, Morato was coming on to try and I think see out the point, and then obviously had to come on for Murillo, which we'll talk about after the break. But Hughes swings a free kick in from the right-hand side that hits the far post. Then I think it was before that, actually, Eze hits a wonderful shot from the edge of the box. And I was right behind that. I thought that was going straight in, brilliantly curled it towards the top right corner, just crashes off the bar. And then there's the Palace goal that's ruled out for offside as well towards the end, which was a let-off of Forest just inside stoppage time, I think, which was checked by VAR, which I've not managed to see a replay of any of these. I can't see it anywhere, Stephen. But by the end, Forest perhaps lucky to see it out in the end.
I think with the Eze shot, we were lucky because a couple of inches lower, it's in the top corner, and it was a brilliant strike from him, to be fair. We were fortunate that one bounced away off the crossbar. With the Eddie Nketiah disallowed goal, when you watch the replay, he's clearly offside. There's no doubt about it. He's a good foot or two ahead of play. It was almost like a shot/pass that then came to him in front of goal, and he tapped it in. But no, he was offside. The linesman saw it straight away. I think even Nketiah knew himself that he was probably offside. So no complaints there with that one.
Yeah, and I think Nketiah skied one from very close range as well. And whenever I watch him, because Forest were obviously rumoured to signing him in last summer, I'm just so glad that we didn't, because I think he seems to think it's all about him. And in front of goal, he really isn't that clinical. And you see the lack of chances that Forest create, and Chris Wood's on nearly 20 goals. I highly doubt Eddie Nketiah will be on the same numbers. So I always see him and think we've dodged a bullet. But Forest did hold out until the end. It finished at Selhurst Park. Crystal Palace 1, Nottingham Forest 1.
The 1865 Match Report.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase of 16 weeks, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
All right, guys, how's it going? Opposition point of view from Palace Mad Mason, as a Palace fan here. And as a Palace fan, that was quite an encouraging performance from us yesterday against Forest. You know, when you've got Forest who are hunting down a Champions League spot, potential Champions League place, against a team who are pretty much solidly 12th. I think now, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think we're 5 points behind 11th, but 5 points or something like that above 13th. We are very solidly 12th at the moment. And for us in an FA Cup final, the league isn't really much of a priority for us. And that was what was quite encouraging to see. I thought Palace were going to throw away the points for free. Got a van going past, just walking a dog. But yeah, like I'm not going to lie. I think that was a good performance. Stars for Palace yesterday. I think Daichi Kamada played really well. When he first signed for us and his first few matches, I thought, nah, he isn't all that really. But he's improved over the last few months, and that was another performance that was right up there for me. Eze's penalty, when he did the hop, skip, jump again, everyone sort of moaned and we went, oh, he's going to miss it again, but he scored. It was a decent penalty. And we nearly scored at the end. So for me, against a team again that's hunting down Champions League, it was quite a promising performance going into the FA Cup final. Obviously, we got one more game against Spurs, but yeah, I feel like it was a good performance from Palace, to be fair. You know, it wasn't too bad. I thought we might have gone 1-0 down, we'd have been a bit hungover after our semi-final win. But yeah, I feel like it was a very encouraging performance. Cheers, guys.
Okay, so let's move on to a few themes that I took away from the match. Firstly, was one that I sort of mentioned throughout the pod, that I didn't really think Forest were at their confident and free-flowing best. And I don't know whether it was something that came from the manager or not, but Forest seemed to not make the extra pass, not go forward in the same way as they normally do when they were without Hudson-Odoi, obviously. But Elanga never really attacked with the same potency or confidence as normal. And I think we have to be better on the ball. We had just, if you look at the stats, just a bit more of possession. But if we're going to play in Europe and in the Champions League, I think you have to be able to play different ways. You have to keep hold of the ball and find ways to score if you can. And that has to be something that Forest improve on, because they're not really that, it's not really an element of their game at the minute. But I think we can't let it detriment our risk-taking and raw ability to drive forward and attack with such confidence. Because I was looking back at the results, and I don't think since we played Ipswich away from home, we've played with that same dominance, that same confidence and threat on the break, particularly home or away from home. And I think tiredness contributes to it, mental fatigue as well, and the injuries that Forest have had all contribute to it, because it does look like the season is maybe catching up with Forest at the minute. But I think a free-flow win against Leicester, a good home performance, might reignite that. But how do you think Stephen Forrest get back to that level going into the last 3 games?
I think we've got to just rediscover our confidence. The form of the last few weeks has dampened the mood of supporters, and I think that's gone through to the players as well. I think if you watch elements of last night's performance, you could see Forest overthinking things, not picking the right pass, not playing with the same fluency that they have done for most of the season. And it was the same against Brentford. We had quite a bit of the ball against Brentford, but again, we were guilty of picking the wrong passes, overthinking it, trying to complicate things too much. Whereas before, I think when we were a bit more of an underdog and the expectation wasn't there, we just played with a lot more freedom, and it feels like that's gone in the last few weeks, probably because the end of season is in sight and the big prize is in sight as well, and it looked like we were on course for the Champions League. And I think it did start with Everton perhaps losing that game the way we did off the back of a not so great performance has damaged our confidence, and that's continued. Aside from the second half of the FA Cup semi-final against Man City, yeah, we haven't played with that same freedom and that same lack of inhibition, I think I want to say, because what happened against Man City is we went 2 goals down and we were up against it and we were suddenly underdogs again. So yeah, I think we've got to find a way of just getting back to that form. I think it comes from the manager and just getting the players together and just reminding them of what they've achieved and what they've been capable of this season. I'm hopeful that the fact we've dropped down the table and we look to be in a worse position than before might work in our favour again, because we're going to be coming from a position where people don't expect us to get into the Champions League. And I'm hoping that does work in our favour, because make no bones about it, Leicester will come to the City ground on Sunday and want to be party poopers and stop us getting into the Champions League and finishing as high as possible.
Yeah, because they'll be salty that in that season, Brendan Rodgers twice in a row finished 5th. They didn't get Champions League, they got Europa League, and Forest finished 5th, and we might get it. So, yeah, they'll be very dogged to stop that. And you mentioned the supporters there as well. I think in the away end, it was very different at home against Brentford. I thought, particularly towards the end, it was quite volatile, and there was some boos at full time, which Ryan, one of my closest friends who sits next to me at Forest, he booed at full time, and I screamed at him that, we're 6th in the Premier League, you cannot be booing at all this season. But I think the away end was very accepting of the fact that Europa League football will be enough. And if it is Europa League, we'll be happy, we'll be confident. There'll be a bit of disappointment about it because of how long we were 3rd, but it shows such progress. Now, before we look ahead, I want to talk about the Murillo injury. Obviously, he goes off with, maybe 10 minutes to go. After one of his, as I mentioned, best performances, I think, in the last month, certainly look back to his best. So I'm not really sure what it was, but he didn't go straight down the tunnel. Obviously, in stoppage time, there was also the brief knock to Milenkovic, who I think is okay. He was down for a while, so hopefully he's okay, because if we are without both of them for the run-in, and it's, Morato and Bolly or Abbott at the back, as much as particularly Abbott is a promising young player and the other two have Premier League experience to an extent, it won't with the same confidence that Murillo and Milenkovic will do. But how important do you think it is that Murillo is fit going forward to, be important to the way we play?
He's one of our best players. There's no doubt about it. So we are a weaker team without Murillo in there. As good and as solid as Morato is, Murillo and Milenkovic have forged such a brilliant partnership this season that it would be a massive blow to lose either of them. I'm hopeful that the injury, if it is an injury, isn't as bad as first feared, because after the game, he walked over to the Forest fans the way first of all, he limped off the pitch, but then 10 minutes later, walked over to the travelling Forest fans and saluted them. So I'm hoping that it was just a case of prevention rather than reacting to a serious injury. And he's come off as a precaution and he'll be fine for Leicester on Sunday.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So a point I think was just about enough. And I think I would have liked to see Forest maybe lose having gone for the win, because I thought there was, once the goal went in, they really just tried to see the point out. And I just wish maybe they had that confidence in themselves to go and win the game. But obviously that didn't come. Maybe it's the manager thinking that a point certainly will be enough. And it does keep us in control, because we know we win our next 3 games, we're in the Champions League with that Chelsea game at the end. And I think the point keeps us in control, if you like, because Chelsea and Newcastle obviously play. We're hoping that, I think, one of them wins, possibly Newcastle preferably, because then if we win our next 2 games, we'll then be ahead of Chelsea, and it would mean on the last day we only have to draw. Whereas if there's a draw in that game, or if we hadn't have won, it would mean we might have to beat Chelsea, which I think I feel more confident for us having to sort of see out the draw, if you like. But going into the last 3, I think the Leicester game is crucial. Obviously, it's a game Forest have to be targeting to win. But I think as much as this season, the only thing that matters is results, not really performance. I think Forest need a momentous, dominant home victory, early goal, maybe a couple of goals, and to play really well, really fluid, to give them confidence going away to West Ham and then hosting Chelsea. Because if they get the job done, maybe a scrappy 1-0 win, like the Tottenham win, that had the chance to be a momentous turning point for Forest. But because of maybe the manner of it and the smash and grab nature, it didn't reignite them. So I think they have to just smash Leicester, go out and try and dominate with the home crowd. It will be up. So how important do you think Leicester is, and how do you think the last 3 will go?
Yeah, it's a massive game on Saturday. I think for the reasons you mentioned, George, that we need to get confidence back in the team. And when you're playing a side like Leicester, who have been poor all season, it should be the perfect opportunity to rack up some goals and provide a win that boosts morale. But as you know, this is Forest we're talking about, and it doesn't always go to plan with us. So, I'm hopeful that we can produce a 3-0, maybe even a 4-0, but I'm not counting on it. I'm expecting perhaps a 1-0 and a scrappy header from Ryan Yates 5 minutes from time just to get us over the line. Jamie Vardy, if he scores on Sunday, gets his 200th goal in the Premier League for Leicester. So you've got that to contend with as well. I'm sure he'll be hell-bent on trying to put a dent in Forest hopes, and Wout Faes will probably turn up and play like Prime Beckenbauer for the day. But, I think on the balance of where they are in the table and where we are in the table, it should be a comfortable win for Forest, and I hope that it is. And I hope that we get back to the kind of form that we've shown earlier in the season, because the players have produced it. They know what they're capable of, and we were 3rd in the table on merit. I think I said this a few weeks ago. We weren't there on fluke. We deserve to be in that position. We know we can do it. And the key is now just playing with that bit of confidence again and just having the faith in our ability to get results. And as for West Ham and Chelsea, again, West Ham are down the bottom. I think they're 16th, 17th. So you almost couldn't pick any better opponents for our next two games than Leicester and West Ham. Certainly Newcastle and Chelsea will be wishing that they got Leicester and West Ham coming up next. So it's another good opportunity for us to pick up 3 points against a West Ham team who are safe but don't have much to play for now. So I'm hopeful that we can get the results we need from the next two games, and then it goes into the final day against Chelsea where it's all in our own hands. And we know that in a one-off game against anybody, provided we keep things tight, provided that we do our jobs properly, we can beat anybody. I think back to the Liverpool game away earlier in the season. I think about the Man City game at home a couple of weeks ago. We've got those kind of performances in us. So as long as we can just keep ourselves in a position where it's in our hands, we can still do it. There's still plenty to be positive about.
Yeah, no, I completely agree and really do hope you're right, Stephen. One thing I would say is if Wout Faes does turn into Beckenbauer, I will never do this podcast again, because he is categorically the worst defender I've ever seen in the Premier League. I'm not exaggerating. He is awful. So if he has a good game, I don't know what I'll do. And Vardy is destined to score, isn't he? So Forest have to score at least 2, I think, to win that. And you think about Crystal Palace, and obviously they've got the cup final, but they have nothing to play for. West Ham, nothing to play for. There's never a season that ends like that for Forest, is there? There's always a playoff or a relegation or something looming, and at least we don't support a boring football club, hey? But thank you for joining me, Stephen. Hope everybody has enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for listening as well. We'll be back later on in the week with the Friday 5 and then with that Leicester report. Congratulations, by the way, to Tom, a friend of the podcast who's recently become a dad. So, yes, we're all happy for you there at the 1865 Towers, Tom. We'll be back very soon. But Forest remain in the top 6 and they have their Champions League destiny in their own hands. Come on, you Reds.
Podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
McCrispy strips are now at McDonald's. I hope you're ready for the most dippable chicken in McDonald's history. Dip it in all the sauces. Dip it in that hot sauce in your bag. Dip it in your McFlurry. Your dip is your business. McCrispy strips at McDonald's.